A poor mechanic found a baby in a broken car. 10 years later, she called him Dad in court. Sometimes the coldest mornings hide the warmest beginnings. In a forgotten corner of a snowy town, a poor mechanic pulls an abandoned car into his garage. Inside, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, is a newborn baby girl, silent, freezing, and left with no note. He takes her in, raises her as his own. For 10 years, no one comes looking, until one day, someone does. This is a story about second chances, quiet heroism, and a love that doesn't begin in the usual way, but stays in the most extraordinary one. If you believe in the power of kindness, if you're drawn to stories that heal, that honor broken people finding their way back to each other, you're in the right place. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It helps bring more heartwarming stories like this one to life, and ensures you never miss a moment of what matters most. Now, let me tell you the story of Rust and Grace. The snow had started falling before dawn, soft and soundless, layering the rooftops in thick white silence. By 7 a.m., the town of Marley Ridge was wrapped in winter's hush. Telephone wires drooped with frost, chimneys puffed out gentle trails of smoke, and the main street was a blank ribbon of white, untouched. But for the tire tracks of a single forgotten car, Will Harper leaned against the doorway of his garage, blowing into his gloved hands. The metal sign above him, Harper's Auto and Salvage, creaked in the wind, its rusted corners catching snow like it was trying to remember what it felt like to be new. The old garage's heater had coughed its last breath sometime around midnight. Will hadn't slept much anyway. Nights were long and sharp, when all you had was the hum of a mini fridge and the occasional radio crackle to keep you company. He rubbed his shoulder, sore from yesterday's engine block, and stared down the road. That's when he saw it. A car, parked crooked at the edge of town where the road curled near the old train crossing. Not unusual in itself. People left junkers all the time when they broke down, but something about this one was off. The doors were frosted shut. The snow on the roof was uneven, like someone had brushed it with a shaky hand. And in this kind of cold, you didn't just abandon a vehicle. Not unless you were desperate. Will grabbed his thickest coat, pulled the hood up over his flannel cap, and trudged down the road, boots crunching fresh powder. The car was a late 90s sedan, dented, rust creaking at the wheel wells. He pressed a gloved hand to the hood, cold as the air, meaning it hadn't run in hours. He cupped his hands to the driver's side window and peered in. Nothing. Back seat. Something moved. Will jerked back, heart hammering. He stepped around to the passenger side, wiped away the frost with a quick swipe. There, in the back seat, barely visible beneath a faded blanket, was a baby. He didn't think. He moved. Yanked the door, frozen shut. He braced his shoulder against it, gritted his teeth and shoved until the metal groaned and gave. The cold bit his skin immediately. Inside, the air was ice. The baby was bundled, yes, but the tiny hands were blue at the fingertips. Her cheeks pale, lips trembling. She didn't even cry, just blinked, confused, as if unsure whether this strange man was real or part of a dream. "Oh, God," Will whispered, reaching in with shaking hands. "Hey there, little one." She couldn't be more than a few days old. He wrapped her in his arms, pressing her close to his chest, his coat flung around them both like wings. Her body was terrifyingly still. He whispered nonsense as he ran. Words weren't meant to make sense in moments like these, just to warm the air and hold space between heartbeats. Back at the garage, he kicked open the door, rushed inside, and placed her on the old cot in the corner. He yanked the space heater closer, threw every blanket he had over her, then cranked the kettle. His fingers shook so badly it took him 3 tries to open the formula sample kit he'd once been given by a neighbor, years ago, and for reasons he no longer remembered. She sipped weakly when he held the bottle to her lips. A sound escaped her then, not quite a cry, more a sigh, a surrender, a breath of hope. Will sat beside her, elbows on his knees, watching the snow pile up on the window ledge. His eyes stung, though it wasn't from the cold. No note, no car keys, no sign of anyone nearby. Just the ghost of footsteps in the snow. Already fading, he reached out a calloused finger and brushed a lock of dark hair from her forehead. "You're safe now," he said softly. "I've got you." Outside, the wind whispered through the cracks in the windowpane. The garage smelled of gasoline and metal. But there, on that cot, was something gentler than either. A weightless thing. A beginning. She blinked up at him, and her eyes, still cloudy, still learning the world, fixed on his. 10 years later, the garage looked just about the same. Maybe a little more rust in the corners, a few more tools scattered across the bench, and a faint smell of cinnamon that hadn't been there before. That came from her. Lila Harper was 10. Now with a crooked ponytail, a voice full of curiosity, and a laugh that had the power to make oil-stained walls feel like home. She ran through the garage like it was her own private kingdom, skipping over extension cords and brake pads with the grace only children possessed. Will stood by the hood of a Chevy pickup, elbow deep in an engine that hadn't seen love since the Bush administration. Lila sat on the stool beside him, swinging her legs, reading aloud from a library book. And the fox said to the rabbit, "Sometimes home isn't a place, it's a person." She paused. "Do you think that's true, Dad?" Will didn't answer right away. He twisted a bolt with a little more force than necessary, then leaned back and wiped his hands on an old rag. "I think that's exactly true," he said. Lila smiled like she knew that already. She had a way of doing that, asking questions just to hear the answers she believed in. She jumped down from the stool and crossed the garage, stopping to pet the old mutt curled in the corner. Bear, a one-eyed rescue who, like most things in Will's life, had been broken once and pieced back together with love and stubbornness. "Maya said her mom's taking her to Disney World next summer," Lila said. "Do you think we'll ever go?" Will paused. "Sure, maybe one day." She looked at him, tilting her head. "But we don't have a lot of money, right?" Will chuckled. "You've been listening to the grown-up radio again, haven't you?" She shrugged. "I just hear stuff." He knelt down and looked her in the eye. "No, we don't have a lot of money. But we've got food, and a warm bed, and Bear's weird little snore, and your singing in the shower. That's a pretty rich life, if you ask me." Lila grinned. "You forgot movie night," Will gasped. "How could I forget movie night?" She threw her arms around his neck, and for a moment Will forgot about unpaid invoices and a transmission job he was already 2 weeks behind on. All he felt was her. Alive. Warm. His. He never told her the whole story. She knew she'd been found. That much was true. She knew he wasn't her biological father, but in the same way Bear wasn't born to them either. It didn't matter. What mattered was who stayed, who showed up, who tucked her in at night. Every year on her birthday, he'd make a cake from scratch, even though he was awful at it. And every year he lit one extra candle, not for her age, but to mark the day they became a family. Lila never asked what happened to her birth mother. Maybe one day she would. And Will would tell her, as gently as he could, that he didn't know, that no one ever came forward, that sometimes people leave not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to stay. That evening, snow returned to Marley Ridge, just as Lila and Will finished their grilled cheese sandwiches. She sat on the worn couch in the garage's office-turned living room, sketching a picture of the Chevy truck with crayons. Will watched her from the counter, sipping his coffee, remembering that morning 10 years ago, the cold that clung to the air, the way her tiny body had barely moved in his arms, the fragile thread of life that had somehow held on. He still didn't understand why she'd been left there. Maybe he never would. But in the space of that mystery, something sacred had grown, something undeniable. She looked up. "Hey, Dad?" "Yeah?" "Do you think the lady who left me Do you think she remembers me? Will wasn't prepared for the question. It hung in the air like breath in the cold, visible and full of weight. He walked over, sat beside her, and took a long breath. I don't know, he said truthfully. But I hope she does. I hope she thinks about you every day and knows you're okay. Lila nodded slowly, her eyes focused on the window where snow was beginning to fall. Will put an arm around her shoulder and she leaned into him. Do you ever wish you hadn't found me? She asked quietly. Will blinked, then kissed the top of her head. Never, he whispered. Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me. She smiled, tucked into his side like a puzzle piece that had finally found its place. Outside, snow fell again, soft and steady, wrapping the world in white. Inside the garage, amid oil stains and old tools, love grew in quiet, ordinary ways, in bedtime stories, burnt toast, and hugs that said more than words ever could. The snow had stopped sometime in the night, but Marley Ridge woke under a blanket of fog, the kind that muffled everything, sound, movement, even thought. From the corner of the garage window, Will could barely make out the mailbox across the road. He stood at the workbench, hands busy with the carburetor from a '72 Cutlass that had no business still being on the road. His mind, though, was on other things. Lila had gone quiet that morning, quieter than usual. Her question from the night before still echoed in his ears. Do you think she remembers me? Will didn't know how to answer a question like that. What he did know was that it had unsettled him in a way he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just the question, it was the timing, the suddenness of it, like something was coming. Just before 9, the bell above the garage door jingled. Will looked up, expecting the usual, someone with jumper cables in hand or a grumpy snowplow driver needing brake pads. But the woman who stepped inside was neither. She moved cautiously, as if unsure she had the right place. A worn parka hugged her frame, the hood still dusted with melting snow. She had dark hair tucked under a knit beanie, and her eyes, grey, searching, scanned the garage like it held something she'd lost a long time ago. Can I help you? Will asked, wiping his hands on a shop rag. I hope so, she said, voice soft. My car died just outside town. Someone at the diner said this was the place to go. Will nodded, motioning toward the office. Keys? Make and model? It's a '98 Corolla, green. Mostly, she said with a faint smile. And here. She held out the keys. Will took them, their fingers brushing for a moment. Her hand was cold. I'll have someone tow it over in a bit. You're lucky it didn't. Freeze solid last night. Lucky, she repeated. But there was something hollow in the way she said it. They stood in silence a beat longer than necessary. I'm Will, he said finally. She hesitated. Grace. The name settled in the air like dust in sunlight. Familiar, too familiar, but he said nothing. You're not from around here, he added casually. She shook her head. Not in a long time, just passing through. Town's not much, he said, but it's kind most days. Grace looked around the garage. Her eyes paused on the cot in the corner, the stack of children's books, the little coat hanging by the door. You live here? Yeah, been here a while. Something flickered across her face, sadness maybe, or guilt. Just then, Lila burst through the office door, boots thudding across the concrete, cheeks flushed from the cold. Her backpack was slung over one shoulder, her hair lopsided in a half-done ponytail. Dad! Miss Harper let us out early because of the fog. She stopped when she saw Grace. Will looked between them. Leela blinked, curiosity rising like steam. Grace didn't speak. Her hand had gone to her mouth just slightly. Her eyes, wide now, were fixed on the girl. Will stepped in. Lila, this is Grace. She's got car trouble. I'll be helping her out. Lila nodded politely, offering a quick wave. Hi. Grace managed a small smile. Hi, sweetheart. The word came too naturally, too gently. Will caught it. Lila turned back to Will. Can I finish the snowman outside? Stay close." She ran off, scarf trailing behind her like a flag of childhood. Grace stood still, eyes glued to the frosted window where Lila's silhouette danced behind the glass. Will spoke low. "You knew her." It wasn't a question. Grace's shoulders fell. She looked tired in a way that no amount of sleep could fix. "I wasn't sure," she whispered, "until I saw her." Will's jaw clenched. "Why are you here?" "I just wanted to see her. I didn't plan anything beyond that, I swear." "You left her," he said flatly. "I know. You left her in a car, in winter." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "Not yet. I was 19, homeless. My parents had thrown me out. I didn't know what else to do." Will didn't speak, didn't move. "I stayed nearby for hours that day," she continued. "Watching from the trees, I saw you take her. I saw how you held her like she was something sacred." Will blinked, slow and deliberate. "I thought maybe someday I'd come back and she'd be okay. And here she is. She's more than okay." Grace stepped back toward the door. "I shouldn't have come." He didn't stop her, just watched as she disappeared into the fog, the door swinging shut behind her. Outside, Lila laughed, a muffled sound, high and bright and full of life. Will turned toward the window. He didn't believe in signs, never had. But something about that morning, the fog, the name, the timing, settled in his chest like a ticking clock. Grace was back, and nothing would be the same. The fog lingered well into the afternoon, clinging to the windows like a memory that wouldn't fade. Will sat at his workbench, tools idle in his hands, the Corolla's hood propped open, but untouched. Grace hadn't come back for her car. Not. Yet he told himself it was better that way. And yet every time the bell above the garage door gave a hopeful jingle, an old customer, a delivery driver, a kid selling fundraiser chocolate, his eyes flicked up. Not her. Lila had gone to her friend, Maya's, after lunch, leaving Will in a quiet too still for comfort. The garage felt hollow today. Or maybe it was just him. He wiped his hands and picked up a wrench he didn't need. The smell of motor oil and dust grounded him. His world was made of these things. Reliable, understandable. Unlike yesterday, the name had hit him like a spark. In dry brush, Grace, and the way she'd looked at Lila, like someone touching glass, afraid it might break. He heard the door open before the bell even rang. "I was hoping you'd still be here," she said. Will didn't look up right away. He tightened a bolt that had already been tight. "I said I'd fix your car, didn't I?" Grace stepped closer. "That's not why I came." He finally met her eyes. They stood in silence again. It was becoming their way. "I'm not here to take her," she said softly. "I swear to you, I just wanted to know if she was okay. I've thought about her every day." "Every day, Will." He looked at her long and hard. "And that's supposed to make up for it?" "No, nothing makes up for it." She moved toward the wall, where old license plates were hung like trophies. Her fingers grazed one from 1998, the year she left. "I had nowhere to go," she said. "I was sleeping in the car. My parents had cut me off. I was scared, alone. She was crying so much that night, and I couldn't do it anymore. I wrapped her up and told myself someone would find her faster if I left her where she could be seen. And you just disappeared." "I stayed, actually, across the street, in the trees. I watched until you picked her up and ran. Then I left. I figured she had a better chance with anyone but me." Will exhaled through his nose, slow and deliberate, his fists unclenched. "She's not just okay," he said. "She's brilliant. She loves books and grilled cheese and snowball fights. She talks too much and sings too loud and leaves her crayons everywhere, and she's mine. I've been here every day since she was placed in my arms like a broken part someone didn't know how to fix." Grace's eyes welled, but she held steady. "I don't want to be in the way," she whispered, "but maybe, if there's a space for me somewhere near her world, just enough to see her grow." Will hesitated. He saw something in her, not just regret, but reverence. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for a second chance at presence. A beat passed. 2, he nodded, almost imperceptibly. She's at Myers today, he said. You could stay for coffee. We've got that weird cinnamon blend she likes. Grace smiled, tears finally slipping free. I'd like that. Later, in the small kitchenette behind the office, Grace cradled a chipped mug with both hands. Will sat across from her, elbows on the table, wary but softening. I didn't know how to reach out, she said. Didn't think I had the right. I used to wonder about you, he admitted. In the beginning, if you'd ever come back, if you even cared. Then after a while I stopped wondering. I had her. That was enough. She has your last name, Grace said. I couldn't give her much else. You gave her everything, she said, more than I ever could. Silence again. Then Grace added quietly, I'm staying at the Belmont Motel, room 6, just for a few days. Will nodded. You thinking of staying longer? I don't know yet. Depends on a lot of things. He didn't press. Outside, the fog had begun to lift. A soft drizzle took its place, pattering on the metal roof in a rhythm that had become familiar over the years. It reminded Will of the day he'd found Lila, the sound of rain, the silence that followed. He watched Grace study the photos on the corkboard behind him, snapshots of Lila through the years. At the zoo, in her Halloween costume, grinning with 2 missing teeth, Grace's hand lingered on one from last fall, Lila standing proudly beside a lopsided jack-o'-lantern. I don't expect her to know me, Grace said, her voice barely audible. Or want me around. I didn't want to die someday without knowing if she was okay. Will's voice came slower this time, less defensive, more tired. She's okay. But this, whatever this is, it's going to be complicated. I know, Grace said. I don't want to make trouble. And yet, they both knew that trouble had a way of arriving uninvited, quietly, like fog or rain. Grace left not long. After promising to call before stopping by again, Will watched her go, unsure what he felt. There was no clean answer, no tidy ending. He turned back toward the garage, toward the smell of gasoline and rain-soaked concrete, and the faintest scent of cinnamon still lingering in the air. He didn't trust her, but he didn't send her away. The next morning, the sun finally cut through the haze. Snow on the rooftops melted just enough to glisten, and Marley Ridge exhaled beneath the brittle blue sky. In the warmth of the garage, Lila was on her stomach in the corner near the space heater, coloring with fierce concentration. Will worked nearby, half focused on an alternator repair, half listening to the radio hum low in the background. Dad, Lila said suddenly, lifting her head, do you know someone named Grace? The wrench in Will's hand slipped, clanged, against the floor. He didn't react at first, just stood there, staring at the socket like it had betrayed him. Where'd you hear that? He asked carefully. Lila shrugged. I found this in the desk drawer. She held up a folded envelope, old, creased, its corners curled like dried leaves. Will recognized it instantly. It was from years ago, part of a thin file he kept tucked away. One of the few things left behind in the car where he'd found her. On the envelope, in soft cursive, was a name, Grace Holloway. Will wiped his hands and took the letter, heart beating slow but heavy. It's just something from before, he said. From when you were little. But it has my birthday on it. Her voice was gentle but insistent. Is she my mom? Will looked at her then. Really looked. Her face still had the roundness of childhood, but her eyes were older than 10, older than they should have been. I don't know everything, he admitted, but yes, I think she might be. Lila sat up straighter. Is she here? He hesitated. She's in town. Lila said nothing for a long moment. Then, softly, can I meet her? Before he could answer, the garage bell chimed again, only this time it wasn't Grace. A woman in her 60s stood framed in the doorway, sharp coat, sharp eyes. Her silver hair was twisted neatly into a bun, and she held a leather bag with the kind of precision that said she was used to things being in order. Will stood slowly. "Can I help you?" She stepped forward like she owned the floor beneath her feet. "I'm Margaret Holloway," she said. "Grace's mother." Lila watched. From the corner, wide-eyed, Will stepped in front of her instinctively. "What are you doing here?" "I've been looking for Grace. When she stopped responding to my calls, I followed the last GPS ping on her phone. I didn't expect her to come here." "She hasn't done anything wrong." Margaret arched an eyebrow. "Hasn't she?" Will crossed his arms. "She came to see if her daughter was okay. That's not a crime." "No," Margaret said coolly, "but this might be." She reached into her bag and pulled out a crisp manila envelope, setting it on the workbench. "You've been caring for a child you never legally adopted. You have no formal guardianship, no court documents, no paper trail whatsoever. And yet you've kept her, without consent, for 10 years. Will's jaw tightened. No one ever came for her. And now someone has. The room went still. Lila didn't understand all the words, but she understood enough. She stood quietly, fists clenched, watching them like someone watching a storm edge toward the house. "What do you want?" Will asked. "I want what's best for my granddaughter," Margaret said. "And that starts with the law being properly involved." He stepped forward. "If you're threatening to take her, I'm ensuring she's protected," Margaret snapped. "From chaos, from instability, from this." Her hand swept the room, at the oil stains, the old cot, the makeshift kitchen. Will's voice dropped. "She has everything she needs here. She's safe, loved." Margaret looked at him for a long time. "That may be, but love without legality is still a risk." With that, she turned and left, heels clicking against concrete. When the door shut, the silence that followed was crushing. Lila spoke first. "She's really my grandma." Will crouched beside her. "Yeah, I guess so." "Is she going to take me away?" He shook his head. "I don't know what's going to happen yet." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I don't want to leave." Will pulled her into his arms. "You're not going anywhere, okay? I'm right here. I'm not letting go." That night, Will called Grace. "She showed up at the garage," he said. "Your mother." Grace sighed. "I should have known. She always kept tabs on me, even when I told her not to. She's filing something. Custody claim or guardianship hearing, I don't know yet, but it's happening." Silence. Then, "I never wanted this." Will closed his eyes. "Well, it's here." Grace's voice dropped to a whisper. "What if I talk to her? Try to—" "Stop it!" Will wanted to believe that would help. But Margaret Holloway didn't seem like the type who backed down once her mind was made. "You do what you can," he said, "but I need to prepare for this." And Lila. He looked over at the girl, asleep on the cot, clutching her stuffed bear like it was a lifeline. "She asked me today if I ever wished I hadn't found her," Will said. "And I told her, no, not for 1 second." Grace didn't reply right away. Then quietly she said, "Neither do I." The letter arrived 2 days later, thick envelope, county seal, a formal header that made Will's stomach twist before he even opened it. Petition for determination of custody. He read it twice, then a third time, standing in the office while the kettle boiled over on the stove behind him. He didn't move to stop it. The steam hissed and fogged the window, but Will's focus was frozen on a single line. Plaintiff, Margaret Holloway. Lila's name sat in black ink on official paper like it didn't belong there, like it had been pulled out of their life and stuck into someone else's world, a world of polished shoes and courtrooms and words like best interest and fitness of guardian. He folded the letter slowly, slid it back into its envelope, and sat down hard in the wooden chair at the kitchen table. The tea boiled dry. "That evening," he told Lila. They sat on the couch together, the dog at their feet, the scent of grilled cheese still lingering from dinner. She held a crayon drawing on her lap, a picture of their garage in winter with a crooked snowman beside it. "Someone's asking a judge to decide where you should live," Will said gently. "It's your grandmother, Grace's mother." Lila didn't speak. "You're not in trouble, and I'm not giving up. But we'll have to go to court, answer questions, let someone else decide." She looked up, her voice small. "Will I have to leave?" "No," he said, firmer than he felt. "You're not going anywhere without a fight." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She leaned into his chest, resting her head beneath his chin, and for a long time, neither of them moved. Later, when he thought she was asleep, Lila whispered into the quiet. "She's not a mom," she said. "You are." Will's breath caught. He didn't correct her. The next morning, Grace showed up at the garage. She looked like she hadn't slept, her hair pulled back hastily, circles under her eyes. "I didn't know she'd go this far," she said, stepping into the office. Will didn't offer coffee, just folded his arms and waited. Grace continued, "I tried talking to her. She said she's doing this because I'm not strong enough to. She doesn't trust you, or me. She thinks this is the only way to fix what happened." "Fix," Will echoed. "That's what she thinks this is? A broken appliance? She thinks she's protecting Lila." Will laughed, but there was no humor in it. "From what? Bedtime stories and burned pancakes?" "From losing her again," Grace said more quietly. "From living in a world without structure, without legal security. She sees your life and she thinks it's fragile. I've held that girl through the flu, through fevers, through nightmares, through questions I didn't have answers to. That's not fragile, that's fatherhood." Grace's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. "I don't want this," she said. "I came back hoping to see her, not take her." "Then stop it," Will said. "Tell the court she's better. Off with me." "You think they'll listen to me?" Grace's voice cracked. "I'm the woman who left her in a car. I've got no legal standing, no credibility. My own mother is using my failure to justify hers." Will looked away. His hands were shaking. "What do you want from me, Grace?" "I want to help," she said, "but I don't know how. I just know I can't stand by while she's pulled away from the only home she's ever known." For a long moment, Will said nothing. Then, "We'll need a lawyer." Grace nodded. "I'll pay for it." He raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to." "I do," she cut in. "It's the first thing I can do. Let me do something right." That night, Will sat at the edge of Lila's bed, watching her sleep. A stuffed rabbit was tucked in beside her, the same one he'd bought from the drugstore the night he found her. Its stitching was loose now. Its fur was worn thin. He touched her hair gently. "I don't know how this ends," he whispered. "But I know who you are. You're brave, you're bright, and you're mine. No piece of paper's going to change that." From the hallway, Grace stood in silence, just out of sight, listening. Her hand rested on the doorframe, her fingers trembling. She didn't speak. She just turned and walked away. 2 days later, the in-court set a date. We'll tape the notice to the fridge beside Lila's artwork. It sat there like a bruise, quiet, visible, impossible to ignore. They'd have to stand in a room full of strangers and prove their love was real. Will didn't know how you explained bedtime, songs and scraped knees to a judge, but he'd try, because this wasn't just about keeping Lila, it was about holding onto the life they'd built, messy, imperfect, but real, a life forged from kindness, persistence, and the choice to stay when someone else walked away. Grace sat in the motel room with the curtains half drawn and the lamp casting a soft amber glow over everything. A shoebox sat in her lap, faded, taped at the corners, like it had been packed in a hurry and carried too far. She hadn't opened it in years, hadn't dared, but now that Lila had a face, a laugh, a room filled with books and boots and messy art, now that she'd seen her daughter not just alive but thriving, the box felt like something she could no longer carry alone. She held it to her chest, as if bracing herself, then opened it slowly. Inside, a stack of letters, neatly folded and numbered in blue ink. 1 for each birthday. 10 in all. Plus one extra, the first one, dated the day after Grace had left her daughter behind in the back seat of a cold, broken-down car. She read through them in silence, the words trembling in her hands. Dear little one, I don't know your name yet. I don't know who will find you, but I know that today I gave you a chance. It doesn't feel like love, but I promise you, it was the only love I had to give. She stopped reading. Her throat tightened. She closed the box and stood. The garage was quiet when she arrived. Will was in the back, organizing parts. He looked up, surprised, but said nothing. I need to show you something, Grace said softly. He dried his hands, his eyes wary. What is it? She held out the box. He took it reluctantly, setting it on the counter and opening the lid. This... Her voice faltered. These are letters. 1 for each year. I wrote them every birthday. I never sent them. I didn't know where to send them. But I couldn't stop writing. Will picked up the first letter, unfolded it. As he read, the edges of his expression softened, just slightly. She continued, I told her about my life, where I was, what I wished I could have done differently. I wrote about the kind of person I hoped she'd be. I imagined who might be raising her, what they'd say when she asked about me. Will's voice was low. You thought she'd ask. I hoped, she whispered, but I didn't deserve that hope. He looked up from the letter. Why are you giving me these now? Because I don't want to be a ghost anymore, she said. I know I can't rewrite the past, but maybe I can help you hold the truth if she ever wants it. Will said nothing, just ran a hand over the top of the box like it was something fragile. I know it's not much, Grace added, but it's all I had. No, Will said quietly. It's something. They stood there in the stillness of the garage, surrounded by engine parts and the scent of oil and coffee and winter air slipping in through the cracked window. Grace's breath fogged in the chill, but her hands no longer trembled. I read the one from her 5th birthday. Last night, she said. It was about how you hope she liked animals, that maybe she had a dog. You imagined someone had taught her to ride a bike. You hoped she liked music. That one killed me. Will finally looked at her, really looked. I taught her piano, he said, just 2 fingers and a cheap keyboard. She plays better than I do now. Grace smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. She doesn't know I'm her mom, she added. She knows, Will said. She's just waiting to decide what to do with it. That hit harder than he intended. Grace nodded, accepting the truth in it. She has your eyes, she said softly. Will chuckled. People say that. I think it's just because we squint. The same when we're thinking. Grace smiled again, smaller now. Do you hate me? Will paused, then shook his head slowly. No. But there were years when I wanted to. She swallowed. That's fair. He took a breath. But you gave her life. And maybe you couldn't give her what she needed then, but you gave someone, me, the chance to try, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. Tears gathered in her eyes. She blinked them back. I want to testify, she said. At the hearing, I want to tell the court what you've done, who you've been to her. Will raised an eyebrow. You think they'll listen? I don't care, she said. They need to hear it anyway. He didn't answer right away. Then he picked up the letter again, folded it neatly, and placed it back in the box. You sure you're ready for that? She met his gaze, steady now. I've waited 10 years to be ready. That night, Will placed the box on the shelf above Lila's bed while she slept. He didn't open it again, not yet. But he knew one day, maybe not soon, maybe not for years, he would take it down and read every word with her. And when she asked, because she would, he'd tell her the truth. Not the kind you read in court. Documents, but the kind that came in ink-stained pages, written by a woman who broke her own heart to give her child a better chance. He'd tell her about Grace. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The county courthouse stood like a sandstone sentinel at the edge of the square, its clock tower casting a long shadow over the snow-dusted sidewalk. Inside, the air was too warm, too dry, and thick with the quiet tension of lives being judged. One at a time, Will adjusted the collar of his borrowed jacket. It didn't quite fit across the shoulders, and the tie Lila had picked out was crooked despite her best efforts. She sat beside him on the bench outside the hearing room, legs swinging, backpack clutched like a shield. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded but didn't look up. "Are you scared?" Will gave a half-smile. "A little." Lila leaned into him, her voice small. "I don't want to live anywhere else." He put his arm around her. "We're going to tell them everything, the truth. That's all we can do." A court officer opened the door and called their names. Time stopped, just for a second, and then they stood and walked in together. The hearing room was modest. No grand jury box, no sweeping speeches. Just a judge with silver hair and kind eyes, a few rows of chairs, a stenographer, and a stack of papers that meant more than any of them wanted to admit. Margaret Holloway sat with her attorney, polished and unreadable. Grace sat a few rows behind, alone. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap they looked like a prayer. Will took the witness seat first. The attorney questioned him about Lila's care, his income, the garage, the absence of legal guardianship. "I did the best I could," he said, calm but steady. "She's never gone hungry, she's never gone unloved." "Mr. Harper," the attorney asked, "isn't it true you found her abandoned and never reported that you intended to keep her permanently?" Will's eyes stayed on the judge. "I reported the abandonment the same day I found her," he said calmly. "Went straight to the sheriff's office, filled out a report, handed over the baby blanket. They posted notices, checked local hospitals, even ran DNA through a database. No one came." He paused, voice steady but thickening. "A caseworker called a few weeks later, said unless I was requesting foster placement or financial aid, there wasn't much else they could do. I told her I'd take care of the girl. I signed what they gave me and waited. But no one ever followed up, no one ever knocked." He looked down, then back at the judge. "Maybe I should have done more. Maybe I should have pushed for legal guardianship back then. But I was scared that if I brought too much attention, they'd take her away and drop her into a system that didn't know her the way I did. She was safe, she was loved, and I stayed." He looked toward Lila. "I've stayed every day since." There was a pause, then the attorney nodded. "No further questions." The judge turned to Will directly. "Why did you keep her?" Will looked toward Lila, then back at the judge. "Because she needed someone. And I needed someone to need." Next, Grace took the stand. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I'm not contesting custody," she said. "I'm here to testify for Mr. Harper." Margaret's attorney objected, but the judge allowed her to speak. "I left my daughter in a moment of fear and failure," Grace said. "But I've watched from afar. I know the kind of life she's had. I saw it with my own eyes when I returned, the way she looks at him, like he's the sun and the ground beneath her feet." "Do you believe Mr. Harper is fit to continue raising her?" the judge asked. Grace swallowed. "I believe he already has." Then it was Lila's turn. The judge leaned down slightly, softening his voice. "Lila, you don't have to answer anything you don't want to. But if you'd like to share how you feel, we're here to listen." Lila looked to Will, who gave her the gentlest of nods. She took a deep breath. "I know I wasn't born in our house," she began. "I know other kids have moms and dads who were there from the start. But my dad, Will, he was the one who stayed. He's the one who taught me to read and tie my shoes and ride a bike. He's the one who came to every school play and held my hand when I was scared of the dentist." She paused, her voice catching. The room was silent. I used to wonder if my real mom would ever come back. But then I realized she gave me the best chance she could. She turned toward Grace. "I'm glad you're here, and I hope we can know each other more." Then she turned back to the judge, standing a little taller. "But he's my dad. He always has been." The judge was quiet for a long moment, letting the words settle. Then he nodded. When the decision came, it wasn't with a gavel or a grand gesture, just a quiet confirmation from the bench. Legal guardianship shall remain with Mr. William Harper. Visitation rights for Miss Grace Holloway will be granted, pending mutual agreement and council approval. No one spoke. Grace's hands unclenched slowly in her lap. Margaret turned her eyes away. Lila slipped her hand into Will's. "You okay, Dad?" He looked down at her, eyes full. "Yeah," he whispered. "I really am." Outside the courthouse, the sun had finally broken through the clouds. The air was cold, but no longer biting. Grace approached them as they walked to the truck. "She's amazing," she said. Will nodded. "She is." They stood in silence a moment longer. "Thank you," Grace said, "for everything." Will looked at her, really looked, and nodded. "You gave her life," he said. "I just picked up from there." Grace smiled, a little sad, a little hopeful. "I'd like to keep being part of it," she said. Will hesitated, then extended a hand. "Then let's figure that out. Together." And as Lila climbed into the truck, Grace stood back and watched. Her daughter laugh, her daughter who had survived not because everything went right, but because someone had stayed when it all went wrong. It was strange how quickly life resumed after the hearing. The snow kept falling, the pipe still creaked in the garage each morning, and the smell of burnt toast still lingered longer than it should have in the office-turned kitchen. But something had shifted. Not in a loud, sweeping way. No, it was subtle, like a window that had been closed for years had finally been opened just enough to let the air move again. Lila was the first to notice. "Dad," she said one night as they washed dishes together, "you've been smiling more." Will chuckled, elbow deep in suds. "I smile plenty." "You smile like one side of your mouth twitches and you pretend it's a real smile, but now it's like both sides." He looked at her. "Is that so?" She nodded, serious. "You should do it more. It looks nice on you." Grace began stopping by once a week. At first it was simple, just a cup of coffee while Lila finished her homework, or a walk through the snow-covered park while Bear sniffed at frozen grass. There were awkward moments, of course. Moments when Lila didn't know what to say, when Grace didn't know whether to reach for her daughter's hand or keep a respectful distance. But there were also small triumphs, shared laughter. The first time Lila asked Grace about her favorite movie, the first time she asked if she could call her just Grace for now, and Grace accepted that. No rush, no expectations. Will watched it all unfold from the sidelines, equal parts grateful and cautious. He and Grace didn't speak much about the past anymore. Not because it wasn't important, but because they both knew it was heavy, and what mattered now was how they moved forward. One evening, after Lila had gone to bed, Grace stayed behind a little longer. Will was closing the garage for the night, switching off the lights one by one. "You've got a rhythm here," she said, watching him from the doorway. He glanced up. 10 years will do that." Grace stepped inside, her hands in her coat pockets. "I envy it sometimes, the way you made something out of so little." "It wasn't nothing," he said. "It was her. That was everything." She smiled at that. It was a soft smile, one that didn't ask for forgiveness or flirtation or anything more than the present moment. "She wants to come to my art class," Grace said. "The one I'm starting next month. For kids." She asked if that was okay. Will dried his hands on a shop towel. "She asked me the same thing. And I said yes." Grace stepped closer. "Thank you for trusting me." Will hesitated, then nodded. You've earned that much. She met his gaze. What about more? The question hung in the air, not as a challenge, but as a quiet wondering. Will looked down, then back at her. I don't know. I'm not asking for a promise, she said. Just, if there's a door open, I'd like to knock. He chuckled, and for a moment it surprised even him. You always did talk like a poet. She laughed. Well, I was a poetry major, before everything. Before everything, he echoed, the phrase wrapping around them like a shared understanding. There was a long pause. Then Will motioned to the little table in the corner, the one he and Lila used for dinner and homework and card games. Stay. For tea? Grace smiled. I'd like that. The next few weeks brought a new kind of stillness. Not empty, but calm. A routine began to take shape. Grace's art class met every Thursday afternoon in the community center. Lila, naturally, was her most enthusiastic student. She painted lopsided barns and pink suns, and a version of bear that looked suspiciously like a squirrel. Will started picking her up after class, and each time he found Grace sitting cross-legged on the floor with paint on her jeans and kids, gathered around her like she was sunlight. You're good with them, he said one day, watching through the window. She looked up, brushing hair from her face. I think I needed them as much as they needed me. Lila came running up with a paint-streaked canvas. Look, it's us. It was a picture of 3 stick figures, one tall, one with long hair, and one smaller, all holding hands. A little, crooked house sat beside them, and above it, in shaky letters, Home. Will's throat tightened. Grace just smiled. I think she sees things clearly, she said. Will nodded, unable to find the right words. One Sunday morning, Will found himself fixing the front step of the garage, the one that had been splintered for years. Lila sat nearby, sketching. Grace arrived with cinnamon rolls wrapped in foil. They ate together on the stoop, letting the winter sun warm their faces. It was simple, easy, and for Will, it was new. He'd spent so long believing love had to be earned, through struggle, that families were built through blood or legality or duty, but watching Lila laugh with her mother, watching Grace nudge frosting onto her nose, watching their small, strange life take root in something gentler, he realized he might have been wrong. Love didn't have to be loud. Sometimes it was just a Sunday morning with cinnamon rolls and sun. That night, after Lila had gone to bed, Grace lingered again. She stood by the window, arms folded, watching the snow begin to fall. Do you think it'll stick? She asked. Will joined her, standing close but not touching. Maybe, he said. Depends on the ground. Grace nodded. Some places hold on longer than others. Will looked at her, and for the first time he let the thought in, fully, completely, that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a temporary piece, that maybe the life he'd built didn't have to stop growing, that even rust, when left in the right hands, could hold something strong. Spring arrived in Marley Ridge slowly, like a child testing the warmth of the ground after a long winter. The snow melted in fits and starts, revealing muddy patches and sleepy blades of green. Birds returned to the trees behind the garage, and, for the first time in months, the wind no longer carried the bite of frost. Inside the garage, sunlight streamed through the tall window above the workbench. The old heater stood silent. It wasn't needed anymore. Will was on his back beneath a Ford that refused to start. His shirt was dusted with sawdust from the new shelves he'd built last week, something he'd meant to do for years, but had never made time for. Now it seemed like things were worth finishing. Footsteps approached, 2 sets. Lila ducked into the garage first, carrying a brown paper lunch bag with his name scribbled on it in purple marker. You forgot this. Will slid out from under the car and sat up, wiping his hands. My hero. Grace followed behind her, brushing wind from her hair. We also brought lemonade. Real lemons this time. No powder. He raised an eyebrow. Am I being spoiled? Possibly, Grace said. You've earned it. Will took the lunch and the lemonade, smiling as Lila launched into a story about school. Something about an art contest and a clay sculpture shaped like a turtle with a mohawk. He only caught half of it. The rest got lost in the simple joy of watching her talk. She was growing fast, taller, surer. But she still reached for his hand when they crossed the street, still looked for his nod of approval before making her final brushstroke, and she still called him Dad. That hadn't changed. Neither had the way Grace lingered a little longer each time she visited, or the way she moved around the garage like someone learning a new rhythm. There was no rush, no declarations, just mornings with laughter, afternoons with paint, evenings with tea. Something whole was blooming from something once broken. That weekend, Will finally fixed the front door of the office. For 10 years, it had creaked and leaned, swollen from winters, and warped from years of closing it too hard. But now, with a new frame and hinges that didn't protest, it swung open and shut like it was never damaged to begin with. Grace stood at the threshold, watching him admire the finished job. "You always fix everything yourself," she said, shrugged. "Part of the job." She tilted her head. "And you never ask for help?" Will smiled. "I'm learning." She stepped inside, handing him a small box. "Then consider this your graduation." Inside, a brand new nameplate for the office door, brushed steel, clean lettering. Harper & Holloway Auto and Artist. Again, 2024. Will stared at it, speechless. "We've been working on the garage mural together," Grace said, motioning to Lila through the window, painting flowers on the side wall with wide, colorful strokes. It felt right. He turned the plate over in his hands. "You sure?" Grace nodded. "It's not just yours anymore. It's ours. All of ours." They mounted the sign together that afternoon. Lila finished her painting, smearing a little yellow on her cheek, then stood back and admired it. "It looks like a postcard," she declared. Grace laughed. "It looks like home." Later that night, after dinner, they sat out behind the garage under a sky full of stars. The spring air was cool, but gentle, like it had been softened by months of snow. Lila curled up beside Will in a blanket, her head on his chest, already half asleep. Grace sat across from them, hands cradling a mug of tea, her eyes glowing in the firelight. "I used to think I wasn't meant for motherhood," she said softly, "that I had broken that part of myself." Will looked down at Lila, then back at Grace. "You didn't break it. You just paused." She smiled, eyes wet with something more peaceful than sadness. "Thank you for holding her while I found my way back." Will shook his head. "Thank you for coming back." They sat in silence for a while, the good kind. Then Grace leaned over, her shoulder brushing his. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked. He glanced at her, the stars reflecting in her eyes. "I think we already are." Months passed. The garage got busier. Grace's art classes expanded to include adults. Will installed a proper heater finally. Lila won second place in the county art fair with a painting titled "My Dad's Hands." And on a quiet Saturday morning, Will stepped outside with a mug of coffee and paused by the freshly painted garage door. There, just beside the mural of "The sun rising over rusted hills," was a tiny inscription in white paint. "Rust is just what happens when something strong learns to weather the storm." No signature, but he knew it was Grace's hand. He traced the words with his thumb, then looked back at the open door where she stood, coffee in hand, smiling. He smiled back, both sides, and as Lila came bounding around the corner, calling for them to come see the new garden bed she'd started, Will stepped forward to join them. A family not by design, not by accident, but by choice, by Rust, by Grace. And that was the story of Rust and Grace. I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Whether you're in a small town like Marley Ridge or a busy city far away, leave a comment below and tell me where you're listening. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories of kindness, healing, and unexpected love waiting to be told, and I'd be honored to share them with you. Thank you truly for spending your time here. Until next time, take care of yourself and of each other.